everybody. Thank you for being here with us to share a great experience from Anuprita about Jugaad Innovation. Thank you very much, Anuprita, to be with us and to share this nice career you had in Jigard Innovation. Few words before give Veronique speech concerning the presentation of Anuprita. Innov is an innovator network. We try to explain, illustrate, that's what we want to do this morning, and animate innovation through a concrete application in our company. We observe what is currently happening. We contribute to new analyses across the world, and we share expertise. To build innovation is a really deep maker mindset. The objective is to bring a pragmatic answer to our members and share also experience and help startup to go ahead. And we share also learnings and make different kind of workshop to inspire our members. So today we are going to speak about Jigard Innovation. I know that most of us always used Jigard practices, even if they don't know. And today it's the opportunity to better understand what Jigard Innovation is and how we can practice it in the daily basis in our company. So thank you again for being here, sharing this experience. Thank you, Anuprita, for this nice session for us. And Veronique, let's go for you.
Yes, thank you, Hélène. And I won't steal the show here. I just wanted to warmly thank Anuprita because we met a while back now when I was working in Singapore. And I always remember Anu because we were also defending women equality in jobs and equality of opportunities. And we have prepared and conducted many events and actions together. So it's really a pleasure to have Anuprita again in this session. I actually miss working and organizing events and action with Anu. So it was a wonderful opportunity. And I really must thank her because she works now with Google and she'll tell you about her career. But she's been quite busy and she had actually a challenge to extract herself from various meetings, and she does a lot of stuff as well for India in COVID today. So Anu, why don't you share first a bit about yourself? Anu is quite modest, so I had to insist that she does that because I told her our members are always keen and curious about other women in the world. So on to you. You have the floor, Anu.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and bonjour to all of you. That's the only French I know, so I'm going to stick to English from here onwards. It was definitely a pleasure interacting with Vero when she was here in Singapore. On the professional front, as well as personally, we started a book club together. So that's a love of reading that we have. And we were founding members, and ever since she's left, I have lost my soulmate on reading here. So let me tell you a little bit about my career journey, and then we'll jump into Jugaad. The definition is right there for you. It's a flexible approach to problem solving. And in many ways, the Hindi equivalent in India, Jugaad is actually used in a way to describe bending the rules or not following the rules, and taking shortcuts, but with a deep level of expertise. So you know that it's going to work, right? So not taking shortcuts for the sake of it, but actually taking a shortcut when you know that it's going to work. In terms of my career journey, it's not that Jugaad is only the domain of Indians. As Hélène was saying, you may be using it and not knowing. So I was working in India in a tech startup, and I sold a very large deal for Intel, which was kind of their biggest deal in Asia. So they wanted me to directly work for them. And they said, hey, we have a non-solicit agreement with, we can't hire you because you work for our distributor, but we can hire you if you decide to leave the country. So that's how I got a job in Singapore, because of Jugaad, right? Thinking about an innovative solution. Like, I want to hire Anuprita, but I can't hire her in India. Is she willing to leave the country? Then I can give her an offer. And that's how I came to Singapore 24 years ago. Opportunities that I had at Intel included creating a vendor network, marketing vendors all over Asia Pacific, and even in Pakistan. So some of you may know that India and Pakistan are always at war with each other, or like they kind of maintain this distance, enmity, I would say, although they used to be one country. So it was incredibly hard to get a visa even to go to Pakistan on an Indian passport. But again, I think Jugaad came to my rescue, because I said, well, if they won't give me a visa by applying for it, can I go and visit the high command, like the high commissioner in Singapore? And I was invited to tea, and he interviewed me and asked me, why you? Why do they want to send, why does Intel, such a big company, want to send you to Pakistan, despite being Indian? So obviously I had to convince him. I got my visa and managed to create that vendor network, which was a fascinating experience for me in my early 20s. I was also then hired by Apple to go open Mumbai office. I am originally from Mumbai, so this was fantastic because I was hired in Singapore. I got an expat assignment in my own country, in my own city even. And so I thought that it was impossible to do something like start an office in India. India is one of the hardest countries to do business in. And there's a lot of underhanded, corrupt practices which happen when you're trying to open an office. So to be able to do that whilst working for an American multinational with high standards of business conduct is something that I learned, like, patience, a lot of patience, and a lot of Jugaad came to my rescue, making sure that I'm following the rules. When I'm doing that, balancing speed with perfection when it comes to opening an office and setting up all the dealer distributor network for Apple. And then I was hired by HP back in Singapore to launch the world's first pocket PC, HP Jornada 540 series. And I was responsible for helping Apple to do celebrity endorsement, which they've never done in their lives before, because I was convincing them about how in India, there are only two religions, cricket and Bollywood. So we need either a cricket superstar or a Bollywood superstar to launch our product. Otherwise, nobody's going to pay any attention. And it was just something that Apple did not do. So looking at how successfully I managed to convince Apple to be able to have Shah Rukh Khan, who is like the Bollywood reigning superstar at that time, be one of our be our celebrity endorser. HP thought that maybe I could play the same magic with the world's first pocket PC, which is HP Jornada 540 series. It predates all smartphones. It was the first time that you could have a computer in your pocket. And again, through various kinds of Jugaad, we managed to get product placement in a Bond movie. This is a historical first for HP because, again, they really have very high respect for women. At that time, we were led by a female CEO, Carly Fiorina. So it was unheard of because the way that women are portrayed in Bond movies is typically that, they have to be rescued and they're damsels in distress, or they are like the bombshell and femme fatale. So to be able to then help rewrite the script of a Bond movie is something that I consider a historical great in my bucket list, because from this movie onwards, we changed the future of Bond heroines forever. This is the first movie in which, instead of Bond rescuing, it was the female lead, Denise Richards, who rescued Bond by detonating the bomb using HP Granada 540 series. So from then onwards, you see women having much more important, intelligent roles in Bond movies, which I take some part of the credit for, not all of it, because it was a team effort. Moving on, I launched Yahoo properties in ASEAN. Again, the ASEAN market is very similar to India. There are a lot of countries around Singapore which are still considered developing or emerging economies. Countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, they are all struggling also with COVID issues right now. But you can imagine that these were all not easy markets to get contracts signed, and to you had to kind of approach it with a mindset of innovation and flexibility and adaptability. Again, these are all language markets, so not being able to speak the local language is also disadvantageous in these markets. But luckily, I was able to help Yahoo launch in all the ASEAN markets. And then I found myself at Dell, where I spent the longest of my career, 10 years. And it was also the place that I got my first patent completely unexpectedly in the area of pricing, which I had never done before. But hey, sometimes you don't see what you're good at. Other people see what you're good at. And at Dell, I also had a pivotal moment in my career. I had a second baby after 16 years of age gap. And I'm here talking to you with this successful track record of moving on from Dell to HPE to Google because of Vero. Because she told me at the time when I had a coffee chat with her, I said, Vero, I'm thinking of taking a break in my career. And, I deserve it. Like, I'm 40 years old, I've just had a baby after such a long age gap. I really need to revel and enjoy. And she said, no, you can't do it because of all that you stand for. And imagine how it is going to be to all those women who are inspired by you to say that, what? She's a stay-at-home mom now? With no disrespect to stay-at-home moms, but Vero was responsible for making sure that I realized the importance of being there and staying there and showing that it can all be done and we can balance multiple things. And I'm very grateful to you, Vero, for that talking sense into me. Well, moving on from Dell, I went to Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, following a boss who I had worked for before, who went from Dell to HPE. And he gave me a challenge of being able to shake a sacred cow. HPE had this channel program which was 70 years old, and it badly needed to be revamped. And I've been very lucky in my career to often be given global roles and global challenges, but I've never had to move to the US. So it's kind of like a myth that in American multinationals, you do need to go to headquarters to be able to make an impact. Because I was able to change HP's channel program, completely revamp, not just modify it or anything like that, but completely break it down and stand it up again, which I think was extremely difficult, one of the most challenging things that I've done in my career. Again, holding a lot of accountability to innovation and making sure that we use the limited resources in the hardware industry. We have very wafer-thin margins. So being able to innovate has been kind of the red thread, as you see. So it was a pleasure to join arguably the world's most innovative company, which innovates everything and touches our lives every day. So I was very happy to go join Google 3 years ago. And I was thinking that what innovation could I possibly bring to Google, which is already such an innovative company? I love the simplicity of just the Google search page. It's just that box, there's no clutter. And as I was looking through it, I thought what I could bring to Google was all the leadership skills that I had learned across these many, many companies. And I was happy to receive in my first year at Google, this Chief Happiness Officer. That's what CHO stands for inspirational leadership. So yeah, I mean, hate talking about myself, but that was my career journey in a snapshot. I'm happy to move over and talk about Jugaad now. And I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. We are a small group here, so if you have questions, please raise. Otherwise, we'll have a debate at the end on the users. I'm going to run through a few quick examples of Jugaad. So as you can see, some of these shoes in the A, these shoes have been fashioned from like recycled materials from an old plastic bottle. So there are actually examples of people creating thermocol shoes that can be used for walking on water. And this is great, right? Because a lot of Indians actually go bare feet. There are still, unfortunately, many Indians who live under $2 a day. So they live below the poverty line. Shoes is a luxury. That's why thinking about the fact that packaging that we discard on a daily basis can be repurposed and made into shoes by simple things like attaching a strap to the thermocol. Then the innovative washing cum exercise machines. So again, there's a lack of electricity in many parts of India. It's not well connected. Even you may have electricity only for 1 hour a day. So many of our modern appliances, which we take for granted, like a washing machine, a dishwasher, even if people have that, they may not be able to run it because of lack of electricity, because of lack of water. So in this case, the electricity is generated by actually the water. Okay. And this slide, I wanted to call out that there's something called a Jigard Cycle, which can be used to generate electricity. So basically, it converts your kinetic energy into potential energy, and it charges a battery. So even when you're not cycling, you can actually use the battery charge. And it can easily fuel things like mobile phones, etc. Making multi-purpose ropes from old saris. So Indians wear these very long flowing dresses, which are 6 meters long. That's the traditional Indian dress, very much worn in India even now. So just many things can be made from saris, like blankets and quilts and multi-purpose ropes. So these are just like small examples which you come across on a daily basis in India, and you, after a while, you just don't blink. But taking it to larger examples, I wanted to call out the difference in, like, for example, the Mars orbiter, which India launched in 2014 or in 2013. It's still there, orbiting Mars, right? And it was at a fraction of the cost of what NASA required. Similarly, there was this carpenter who lost his foot, and he decided to just make himself a prosthetic foot, which cost him $45. You can see how effective the prosthetic foot is in these various photographs. And at the time that he made it, it's called the Jaipur foot because it was made in Jaipur, which is a city in India. At the time he made it, the actual cost of a prosthetic foot was $12,000. Of course, now with 3D printing, etc., you can get a foot for $50. But this was like 20 years ago that he already made this. And again, $50 for the cost of a cataract surgery. So this hospital, Arvind Eye Care, does 70% of the cataract surgeries that they do are free of cost. And they only charge the people who can afford to pay. Similarly, Jaipur Foot, the prosthetics are made free of cost for a number of people who need it. And then, again, you use the subsidies from people who can afford it. There are many, many examples. Tata Memorial Hospital, which is a cancer hospital, completely free and works only on donations. And then because they want to make those donations, they want the dollar to go a long way. They want to make sure that they use frugal innovations wherever they can in healthcare. So let's move to the next slide. So these are the characteristics of what frugal innovation is all about, that we think about the cost a great deal because there is not that much money to be had in these markets, which are emerging or developing markets. They should not, however, compromise on performance. So you may be able to see low cost may still give you the same level of performance or even higher performance sometimes. And it's not about defeaturing. So again, as I was telling you, this frugal innovation comes from a place of deep knowledge about how things work. It's not something which is a shortcut for the sake of taking a shortcut. And how we think about it is the ability to scale. So you won't make it only for yourself, although it may originally start because you made it for yourself. You're always thinking about how to scale it. It's much easier to scale frugal innovation because the return on investment is almost immediate. You don't have to build a huge business case for it because it's very evident that something which costs $50, it's easy for anybody to approve that budget for a pilot. And yeah, as I said, it doesn't compromise with the quality. So the low cost does not mean low tech in this case. And a lot of innovations have actually originated in India. So think about like Google Pay. Google Pay actually was originated in India, and we have the largest base in India. From a payments platform, India went to digital payments faster than many developed nations. And overnight they decided, okay, demonetize, de-recognize your currency, and everything goes, including the street vendors, everything goes to online payments. To do that in a country of 1.3 billion is amazing. So let's move on. And I wanted to show you some recent examples of during COVID. So you can see how this is a milkman who delivers milk and this is like fresh milk every day. This is using safe distancing because there's a pipe and he's pouring through the funnel so that there is no contactless delivery of milk. And the next one is very cute, because you can see this clothes hanger. It's a plastic clothes hanger, which is functioning as a tripod, holding her mobile phone. This is a teacher who had to deliver lessons to her students during COVID. And it just blew my mind because we are thinking here about Zoom and bandwidth and blah, blah, and how do you record and where do you save, etc. And, just people taking it in their hands and saying like, I need to deliver this class. I'm just going to do it with whatever material I have available to me. And then the next example is because a lot of people travel in auto rickshaws, and of course there's huge population. So how do you make sure you wash your hands every time? Sanitizer is quite expensive and it's not easy. Water is much cheaper or free because India is a land of rivers. So here you can see a water dispenser, the soap dispenser, and people can just wash hands when they enter or exit your auto rickshaw. So many, many such kind of ideas. They occur to people regardless of their education levels. People are always thinking about how to innovate, to be able to solve a problem. And they're not thinking about the creativity, but we look at it and we say, wow, that's very creative. Why didn't I think of that before? Okay, let's move to the next slide.
Sorry, coming.
So the essence of Jugaad is simplicity, right? Everyone can benefit. So the idea is, as I said, scale. So, BAT is a low-cost risk tool, which helps people who are visually impaired to sense, instead of having the walking stick, which has been used for eons. Now that we have motion sensors, or we have sensors to alert us of obstacles by using vibrations, and sensor technology is so cheap, right? So this is like just the right thing to do. Why don't we already have that, right? And this is going to impact 36 million people who are visually impaired today already in the next 10, 15 years because of people, aging populations across the world. Hundreds of people are going to be visually impaired in some way. They may not be completely blind. SADA kit actually is just a simple mobile toilet. As I was telling you, a lot of poor people in India, and therefore many of them don't have access to clean water, sanitation, and they definitely don't have access to toilets. So this is like got just a mobile toilet with a pop-up shield for privacy. It's got a whistle for alerting people in case the girl perceives a threat from any stranger or anything like that. And then, yeah, it's just got like a soap and the essentials, like a disposable bag, some sanitary napkins. 2 billion people in the world have no access to toilets. And that's staggering, considering we are 7 billion people in the world. You can't imagine not having access to a toilet. So again, and then Bijli, I was talking about this, right? It focuses on converting kinetic energy. That energy can be saved even in a battery. So when you're just sitting here having this conversation, you could be just cycling on your stationary bike and converting that energy to be used as electricity. So those were all the examples that I had for you, and would love to open it up for some debates on some thoughts that we had. Vero, do you want to open up the debate?
Yes. Maybe before we open that up, is there any question to Anuprita on the example she gave, or would you like to share some more examples before we open up that debate, which I think is also very interesting? Any question from anybody at this time? Well, if you don't feel comfortable enough in English, don't hesitate to ask your question in French, and I'll be happy to translate.
My written French is better than my spoken French because I can use Google Translate.
Yeah. So apparently no questions. Feel free to raise your hands if you do have questions.
Yeah. I would love to just hear thoughts in the chat, like even if you don't have a question. Yep. Was this something you already knew about? What parts of this Jugaad surprised you? Would love to just get your feedback.
Great. We have one hand. Hey, Lou, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for this great presentation. It's always very nice to see how Jigard and very Frugal Innovation is put it in place. My question is related from your background and the number of companies that you are working on. How you are able, or do you have examples in how Jigard can be used into a large corporation where you have tons of engineers that usually they don't have that Jigard mindset? and how you're able to introduce that mindset in those big tech engineering way of doing things and development. Thank you.
Great question, Lou. So one of the things that I mentioned whilst I was talking about my career journey is that I have managed to be in global roles despite staying here in Singapore. And the reason that that came about was because there were many things that we did in APAC first and then scaled it globally. And whilst we were doing it in APAC first, we were not the design center, so we were not given those budgets ourselves. However, it's very important to solve for the local population. Many things which may be taken for granted in the US or in Europe can't be taken for granted here in India, for example. So there were many things which we designed for a particular market here, designed it for Indonesia or designed it for India, and then scaled it back. So the engineers who are working on these problems are local here. So they might be based in Taiwan or Japan. It might be a language issue. It might be a cultural nuance where people use things in a particular way. I'll give you an example. So we found in our mobile phone research, I am responsible for customer experience for the Pixel phone here in Google. And we found in our research that whilst in the US, people are willing to play around with the phone to discover the features of the phone, maybe 1 out of 5 people call us up for help in, let's say, setting up a new phone. If at all, or they may call us up for like, what's this feature? Why is this not working this way, or blah, blah. But we found that in Japan, people are very reluctant to play around with the phone or the feature because they're afraid of breaking something. So they want to have a paper guide, like a manual. And this might be similar to Germany. Where you see German products always come with like a user manual. And that's kind of how the Japanese market works. So you do something which is local to the market. It was a great success. We found on that after launching that sort of paper guide, we had fantastic response from users, and a lot of people can now set up their phone in less than 15 minutes, which was not the case before, right? So these are some things where it may not always be an engineering innovation. It could just be the way that people are used to doing things and recognizing that. But plenty of things in the engineering domain as well. Like I was giving you the example of payments, digital payments, which was designed by a company here in India. And it was then transported to the rest of Google for GPay, right? That use it. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Those are fantastic examples that you have mentioned. I like the way you put also cross-cultural communication between Germany and Japan, and to find solutions that actually already exist somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And while preparing this session with Anu, we were thinking, well, how does it, because you've seen a lot of example there in, I would say, emerging countries, developing countries. And I think, Anu, I'd like you also to share what you think about teaching Jugaad. There has been a lot of sessions in a major university like Stanford universities, Cambridge.
Donc là, il faudra bien plugger le chargement continu avec ça.
Unmute. There's somebody talking here. Please put your. Can you put your phone on mute? Thank you. But we were discussing how can this be actually useful in a Western world where we are, until now, at least used to a land of plenty. And with the world changing, and especially with the COVID situation and the post-COVID situation, it seems, to be proven, that we are entering a world of shortage. We have a shortage of raw materials, shortage even of wood, even in countries like France, where you do produce wood. So it's probably going to be more important that we are not used to shortage, that we revert back to simple creativity to compensate some of the shortage we have. Also, I've put here in this presentation a reference to a document where all the UX engineers are using Jugaad method and approach to avoid complexity. The danger, as Lou mentioned, in usability is that engineers, being engineers, love to engineer things and very often over-engineer things. I was referring to a personal example and experience I had. I don't own a car, so I often rent a car, and I happened to be upgraded and rent a very nice Mercedes, and the GPS there, it took me half hour to really understand the feature and be able to navigate. I don't think I'm particularly clever, but I'm not particularly silly either. So it was clearly the joy of an engineer enjoying himself or herself, trying to produce something with a lot of feature, but very hard to use. And the other examples that you'll find also in this article is a circular economy, because circular design aims at using and reusing. And very often Jugaad is, as you've seen, reusing existing material or diverting existing materials. So things like plastic bottle that were used for a specific purpose are being diverted. And this is some of the inspiration as well of the circular economy. So, and these are some of the examples as to, how in our Western world, we are inspired and we can use some of the Jugaad principle. I don't know if you have example there or you have some thoughts, but I also, Anu, I think you had your views as to the ability to teach Jugaad.
Yeah, so I was thinking about how I am predisposed to looking for flexibility or looking for adaptability, thinking about how we could solve a problem in a simpler way with lower cost. I live in a first world country like Singapore, and I have done well for myself, but I can't stop thinking about how do I do something at a lower cost, right? Like, why am I spending this much money? Can I be able to? So I almost can't get the India out of me. So I can't get the Jugaad out of me, even though I have left India and I live in Singapore for the last 24 years. I was thinking about my daughter who's lived her whole life in Singapore, and she lives in the UK now. It's really hard for me to be able to teach this skill unless you're very, very mindful yourself. You have to be intentional about looking at a problem and then re-looking at the problem with the lens that I want to make this simpler and I want to make this cheaper because I want to scale this solution. I want to put this in the hands of every single user. And therefore, I want to make this free. How can I make it free? What's a way for me to scale? So you have to keep reminding and keep thinking about what is it that I can do to make the world a better place. That has to come from within. Because if you're living in your bubble, saying that, look, I don't have to think about the world's problems, those are not my problems. Suddenly something like COVID comes along, and then the whole world is battling a common problem. So the kind of jugaad which happened in creating, production lines for COVID vaccines, this is amazing, right? And the speed at which the vaccines appeared and were tested, etc. That all came from a place of innovation, and that all came from a place of not thinking linearly and not thinking about your country alone, but thinking that if we don't solve the vaccination for the world, then none of us are going anywhere. We are sort of confined into our own spaces. But I do admit that it's a very hard skill to teach. You need to be steeped into that culture. You need to want to live, breathe that culture. You need to apply this lens very, very intentionally. And you'll often find that people who have grown up with shortage or scarcity will be predisposed to asking the question, how expensive is it? And can we make it cheaper? This might contradict a lot of thinking where the conventional thinking is high quality demands high cost. And so here you have to kind of challenge that stereotype in your brain that, no, can I get this quality at a lower cost? And what if I don't have that money to spend?
Yeah, so I never thought of this idea of high quality with high cost, which it's true that in the Western world, we have a tendency to associate high quality with high cost. Like, for example, German products, might be more expensive, but they have a reputation of high quality. So, which is sometimes true. If you do use some kind of material, this is very often justified, but maybe not always. And I also like the example you gave about food, that being French, that we tend to look at Michelin stars restaurant, and that in Asia you may have a different view of things. So what would that be?
Yeah, I read about the Michelin star chef, or I saw a documentary actually on the amount of pressure on a Michelin star chef when he loses a star, that there are people who commit suicide for this. And I was thinking to myself that it's just like, we don't need to do that to people. We don't need to make that pressure so high that people have to give up their life for losing a star. Food, from my perspective, is meant to be something that we use as a fuel for our body to be able to do our functions. And of course, you may have tasty food and you may have tasty food, but there is marginal utility in what you can do at a Michelin star level versus for the actual utility of the food. As I mentioned, I know people who have $2 a day to spend on food. And yeah, we have to shift that thinking to be able to, as I said, be helpful to people at scale all over the world, and start thinking about the whole world as our playground. Would we be able to scale ourselves to be able to innovate and solve shortages across the world, even if you're not living personally in shortage?
Yeah, so, I guess a lot of debate there. And I want to leave it open. And again, please feel free to type into, we have quite a few thanks, Anu, on your presentation. If you do have question, or you'd rather put it in the chat, please feel free. Don't hesitate to raise your hands if you have direct question. And again, don't feel obliged to ask your questions in English. French would do. Other language than French or English is going to be maybe more difficult, but with Google Translate, I know whatever you can ask your question in any language. So before closing our first session of La Rentrée, as we used to say in France, normally August is a month of more break and holidays. So we tend to have September as getting back to school, getting back to work. I'd like to mention, if you want to know more about Jugaad Innovation, we will share the presentation, of course, and you have the link before that. Will really encourage you to go and see this page because it's quite thorough as to the current usage of Jugaad. This is really the book of reference written by Navi Raju and his colleagues. But honestly, I think we can say, Anu, that Navi Raju is the theoretician of Jugaad, the guy who made it popular internationally, who developed a whole method and theory and wrote and published quite a successful book. So wanted to mention his book and his work here. In case you are interested, you also have this famous cover that we have reused in the presentation. There are several editions, of course. I've even seen that there is a Jugaad 3.0 book release. So it seems that it is still quite useful and used. So I'll let you, Anu, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's been a challenge to free it up, and I'll let you, unless we have people who would like to interfere or make comments, I'll let you conclude our session.
Okay, looks like no questions. All right. Well, thank you again for having me. And I just wanted to say that despite all the books and the relative popularity of Jugaad after a Harvard Business Review paper was written on it in 2010, I just wanted to say that Jugaad is something which is just steeped into the Indian culture. It's very, it's just very much there in every language in India in some shape or form. And therefore, it's just a way of life. You know, talk to your colleagues or friends who may have spent some time in India, and they'll tell you that it's just a way of life. That's how people live their whole life in India. So, so yes, it's a skill which can be acquired by reading to a limited degree, but you have to really steep yourself into it. All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye. And we'll share the presentation on our website. So thank you everybody for being here this morning, and thank you. And hopefully we get inspired and to have various ways of innovating. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. I'm going to close the session now.